Shaman's View, the view from the invisible world. I'm Dr. Alberto Villoldo. Today, I want to take you through the legend of the Grail, of the quest for the Holy Grail. This is an Arthurian legend. It's an ancient legend. It's 800, almost 1,000 years old before it was written on paper, but even dating from before that time. And it's universal because it is such an archetypal and relevant story even today. So I'd like to take you through the legend and see the treasures that it has to offer us in today's world. So Parzival, the story of Parzival. Parzival was taken by his mother deep into the woods so that he would not follow his father's footsteps. His father had been killed in battle, had been a warrior, killed in battle, and she didn't want the same fate to befall her son. So here you have the mother trying to protect her child. But while playing in the woods one day, Parzival, young Parzival, sees three knights in shining armor and their horses with their lances. And he says, I want to be one of you. Where do you live? What? And they said to him, we're from King Arthur's court. He said, I want to come with you. And they laughed at the little boy, country boy. And he went and said to his mother, I'm going to be a great knight. I'm going to be the greatest knight that ever lived. And he says goodbye to his mother. Her name was Heartfelt Sorrow, Heartful Sorrow. What a name. We know it's not going to be a happy ending for mom. So he leaves the woods and as he's making his way to Arthur's court, he comes across a wedding feast. So here young Parzival is heading right into the warrior path. But what he finds along the way is an opportunity to take a different path, to take the path of the lover. And he comes across this feast and he enters this great tent, and there's this magnificent buffet laid out, and there's a beautiful maiden there, and he's going around and tasting the food and asking her what's going on here, what is this about, and who's getting married. And she says, you. And he drinks a lot of the wine and he ends up spending the night with her, but never consummating their marriage. So he misses the opportunity, the masculine force, the masculine element. And we all have a masculine and a feminine side. But in this story, Parzival, our masculine side, chooses the way of war, the way of the test of blood over the test of love. And who knows, maybe there's a little bit less bloodshed in this path because we know that love is an extraordinarily challenging way to get to God, but perhaps the most rewarding. So young Parzival gets to the court and he walks right into the castle, and there's a great festivity happening. And all the knights are seated around the round table, and King Arthur is there. And he goes up to the king and he says, I want to sit with you. I want to be a great knight. And they all laugh at him, and they've had a little bit too much to drink. So Arthur says to him, look, boy, if you can defeat the Red Knight is the fiercest knight, disrespects everybody, doesn't even bow to the queen. If you can defeat him in battle, you can have his horse and his place at the dinner table. And the Red Knight just laughs at the boy. But Arthur comes and challenges him in public. And he challenges him to a duel tomorrow. And the knight had to accept because he had been challenged in public. Following morning, everybody's gathered there. The Red Knight is mounted on his horse, and Parzival is barefoot. He doesn't even have a horse. So the Red Knight comes charging towards him, and he takes his knife, his little travel knife, and he throws it at the Red Knight, and it strikes him right through his visor. Impossibly lucky shot. And he kills the Red Knight. The Red Knight falls off his horse. He slays the Red Knight, and like Arthur promised, he gets the knight's horse and his garments, and of course his sword and his dagger and his and his armor. And then Parsifal is making his way back to the country, perhaps to visit his mother, but he comes across a lake and there's a man in a boat, and this is the Fisher King. And he asks the man if he knows if there's a place nearby that he could rest for the evening. And the king says, yes, come to my castle. Come, you're welcome there. And the Fisher King is wounded. He is fishing in the lake, but he has been wounded in the groin. His sexuality is wounded. But there's a legend in that castle that a young man will come one day and he will ask a question. And the question is, whom does the Grail serve? And this, of course, is the Grail castle. Parsifal has stumbled upon it. And he gets to the castle and they dismounts his horse and they receive him and they give him fresh clothing and a bath and they lead him to a magnificent feast. And Parsifal is very quiet. Everybody's very quiet. They're waiting for this young man to ask the question, whom does the Grail serve? And that will break the spell, will shatter the spell of the kingdom. The fields will become productive again. I need balance will be restored. Everybody's waiting. And Parsifal, of course, was told by his grandmother, don't ask any questions and don't speak unless you're spoken to. He's being a good boy. The masculine is behaving, but misses the opportunity to ask the question, because the question is what will take him on the quest. The whole purpose of the question is not to get the answer. That's what we think in our schooling, our education. What's the answer? No, the object of it is to go on a quest. He didn't ask the question. And the Grail is brought out, and everybody drinks from it except Parsifal and the king. The king is in pain, wounded in his sexuality. And this is what happens to the masculine if the masculine does not go on a quest. The old man's sexuality is wounded. He's lost his power, his fertility, and he's resigned to living in old age and pain, missing the Grail, not being healed, not being abundant again. And this, unfortunately, is the fate that is in store for our masculine side in the culture that we live in. The wounding of our sexuality, the inability to heal, and the inability to become fertile for the fields and for the people to celebrate again with joy. You become an angry old man, internally or externally as well. The next day, Parsifal gets out of bed and the castle is deserted. No one there. His horse is saddled, but there's a sword. And the sword is a gift from the Fisher King. And now he must follow the path of the warrior, the path of the sword. Oh, difficult path, challenging path. And he makes his way back to the court and hears, of course, the news that his mother has passed away. And he's lucky to find a mentor, a man named Garamond. And Garamond begins to mentor the young man and to teach him the ways of the court, the ways of the battlefield, the honor of the knight. And he says to him, do not ever seduce or allow yourself to be seduced by anyone. Do not ever seduce or allow yourself to be seduced by anyone. Do not utilize this power to manipulate, and do not get seduced by the stories that you tell yourself about how great this relationship is going to be, about how fantastic this job is going to turn out, about this next great project. Self-seduction is the worst kind. I asked a woman friend of mine very powerful woman. And I asked her, how long does it take to seduce a man? And she said, 15 seconds. The masculine side is so seductible, seduced not only by the feminine, but seduced by, especially by the ideas of greatness, of what a great dream this is going to turn out to be when it really is on its way to becoming a nightmare. So he gets schooled in the arts of knighthood by Garamond, and he returns to the court, and he becomes a great knight, actually. He spends the rest of his military career rescuing fair damsels and liberating castles that were under siege and becoming the ultimate warrior. And now he is the greatest of the knights, honored and recognized and sitting around the table to King Arthur's right, the place of honor. And he has his arm over his chair, reclining and drinking his wine. And an old hag comes to him. This is the old hag. This is the feminine showing up again in the story. The same feminine that he failed to meet in the matrimonial chamber in union with the divine feminine. She shows up again now as the hag. And this is the terrible old woman. And she is known as the hideous maiden. And she goes to Parzival and says, I know who you are. I know who you really are. You are a fake. You are a failure. Even when the path of beauty was offered to you, you failed to consummate your marriage. You are a total fraud. And she walks away. And Parzival is devastated because he knows that it's the truth. And the hideous maiden shows up in everybody's life. Sometimes she shows up in the mirror. When you look into the mirror and you go, oh my God, look who I have become. Now, this is part of the legend of Aphrodite. You've heard of Aphrodite in the Greek traditions. She holds the mirror, and she's not asking who's the fairest one of all, the most beautiful one. She's going, look at you. Look what you've turned into. Look what you've become. This is the second awakening, the great awakening that Parzival goes through. And at that point, all of the knights around the round table decide that they will go on the Grail quest and that they will not follow a trail, any trail into the woods. Because if there's a trail there, it means that someone has already gone on that path and not found what they were looking for. It has to be a place where there's no trails, where you have to make your own path. And this is the quality of the quest. And this is what happens when we have the great wake up, when the hideous maiden shows up, or when life shows up and says, hey, nothing is ever going to be the same again. And you cannot look for a nicer, better trail or path, but you have to go into the deepest, darkest place in the forest on a trail that no man and no woman has ever been on before. It must be yours. And then you have the promise of perhaps finding the Grail castle again and asking the question, whom does the Grail serve? So towards the end of his life, Parzival is old. He has his armor, his suit of armor on, and he's riding his horse, and his lance is dragging behind him, and he has a sword by his side, and he hasn't washed in a few days. And he comes across a group of pilgrims. And the priest, the holy man in the group, turns to him and he says, why are you wearing your body armor in today? Today's a holy day. It's Good Friday. It's the day that our Lord was crucified. Death shows up. The divine, the mystical death that promises a renaissance. What are you doing in your battle gear? And Parsifal is ashamed and he takes off his suit of armor, his protections. At that point, if we want to embark on that quest, we need to dismantle the protections that are designed to make our life a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more entertaining, a little less arduous, maybe getting us a little more sleep. We've got to take the armoring off that protects our soft underbelly. And he gets off his horse and he leads his horse in to the edge of the forest and sets his horse free and walks in to the darkest part of the wood on the quest once again, leaving behind the ways of the warrior and becoming now in the tarot deck. This is the hermit. This is the one that goes on that solo quest to find the grail. And the grail is the cup of Christ. This is a legendary cup of Christ that has the elixir of immortality in it, that heals all wounds. But in order to be able to receive that gift, you have to ask the question. And the question is, whom does the grail serve? And remember that the important thing is not the answer, but to be able to ask the question. Whom does the grail serve? Once you receive that grail, who will you serve? How will you serve? Good luck in your journey, in your quest. This is the time to return to that great exploration, to discover that grail that is made available to each and every one of us. But that we have to make the choices. We have to take the body armor off. We cannot hide from the hideous maiden, the one that's coming to say, look at you. I know who you really are. Look at what you have turned into. Look at what you have become. Oh my God. Or those of us that continue to be wounded by our childhood wounds, by our sexuality, by our intimacy or lack of that, to go through the great healing and to embark onto that darkest part of the forest that has never been explored by any woman or man, so that we may have an authentic, a unique, and a truthful journey to that highest of quest, which is the quest for the grail. And to ask, whom does the grail serve? Thank you so much for joining me in the Shaman's View. And I hope that the story can be of help during these times that we're facing the hideous maiden. That she's saying, look at what you have turned into, humanity. Look at you. Look at what men and women, how you've spoiled the earth and spoiled her beautiful rivers. Look what you've turned into. Let's go on that quest and find that new human so that we may truly find how we can be of service. Blessings. Thank you very much.